The rain doesn't stop anymore. It hasn't for years. Not the kind of rain you remember, the gentle sort that used to lull you to sleep against a pane of glass. This is something else. A beast gnawing at the edges of what's left. Thick sheets, fall day and night, hammering rooftops, bending steel, turning streets into black rivers. The sound of it never fades. It's the constant background hum of this new world. Every hour it beats down like a punishment, like the sky itself is trying to drown what remains. I don't remember the last dry day. I don't think anyone does. The cities, what's left of them, have become half-drowned skeletons. Whole districts swallowed by floodwaters, subway systems turned to underwater tombs. Skyscrapers jut from churning waves like rotten teeth, and rooftops have become the last dry patches for those too stubborn or too scared to leave. The old world's lights have long flickered out. Power grids collapsed under the weight of storms that never gave reprieve. Cell towers snapped like matchsticks in wind that screamed louder than any siren. Now only small signals hum through the static emergency broadcasts. Pirate frequencies, desperate voices trying to find each other. Across the wet void, I'm one of them. The place I'm broadcasting from used to be a fire station. Concrete, brick, built to last, but not built for this. I've stacked sandbags as high as the windows and sealed every door with sheets of scavenged plastic and rotting lumber. Still, the water leaks in through the cracks, creeping like a disease. The basement is gone. The first floor is ankle deep most days. I sleep on a cot in the radio room now, surrounded by gear, powered by a dying solar bank and a hand-cranked backup. I use when the clouds choke out the sun for weeks. They always do outside. The world has softened at the edges. Trees grow crooked, their roots rising above ground, seeking breath in drowning soil. Animals, what few are left, don't behave like they used to. The birds don't sing. They scream warnings. Dogs roam in feral packs, skittish and wet-furred, their eyes sunken with hunger. I saw a deer once, standing on an overpass, shivering under a rusted-out billboard. It was just staring at the flood below, as if it was waiting for the water to rise. It always rises. Landmarks are gone, streets erased. You can sail a canoe down what used to be Main Street. I know this because I have. I paddled past the shattered husk of a diner I used to eat at, its neon sign flickering under 6 feet of water. Playgrounds, past submerged school buses and tangled power lines swaying like weeds in the murk. Nothing is where it should be anymore. The map is meaningless, and the people, fewer now. The storm took most. The sickness took more. When the flooding started, the government tried to hold on. Relief convoys, makeshift shelters in stadiums, water-purifying drones dropped from cargo planes. But when the sea pushed inland and the rivers burst their banks again, and again they gave up, the ones who stayed behind were told to evacuate. Many couldn't. Many wouldn't. Now, the only officials are the ones who turned survivalist. Paramilitary types with salvaged gear and their own warped sense of order. I steer clear of them. Most people do. There are still groups out there, nomads, scavengers, old community pods in high-rise, rooftops, or mountain cabins. Some trade, some steal, some broadcast, like I do. I've heard their voices in the static, bits of music, coded messages, weather readings shouted across the wet void. We're all little islands now, floating voices in the flood no one trusts anymore. Not really. We survive in patches, on rooftops, on houseboats, in tree houses built on telephone poles. I met a woman once who lived in a floating greenhouse made from salvaged bus frames and rain barrels. She grew moss and mushrooms, claimed it was enough to live on. She said the mushrooms listened to the weather. I didn't laugh. You stopped laughing. At things like that, when you've seen the world come apart, and still we go on. Some instinct in Uzdimer than hope, stronger than fear, just keeps moving forward, keeps trying, keeps breathing in the wet air, waiting for the thunder to roll by. It just parks above your head and roars until your bones feel hollow. The rain will fall again tonight, maybe harder than ever. I keep checking the river level, not because I think it'll go down, but because I want to know how long I have before I have to move again, or swim, or drown. But for now, I'm still here, still dry, still broadcasting. If you're out there, if you can hear this, know that the world is still here, too drowned, gasping, shivering, but still here. And for now, so are we. My name is Mara Keene, and I am the voice between thunderstorms. I used to be an environmental journalist tracking storms, measuring rainfall, interviewing scientists about shifting weather patterns. I thought I understood water. I never imagined it would become our executioner. Now, I sit here in this half-drowned fire station, my feet tucked beneath me on a folding cot, the microphone pressed close to my lips. The hiss and crackle of static is my constant companion. It reminds me I'm alive. It reminds me I still have a story to tell. Survival isn't glamorous. I spend hours each day patching sandbags, sealing windows, and clearing the mold that creeps in like a silent invader. I ration my water-collecting rain from every inch of rooftop I can reach, filtering it through cloth and charcoal before I dare sip. My food stores consist of dehydrated apples, scavenged canned beans, and whatever I can trade for at the floating market upriver. Every week, I pilot my makeshift canoe through back alley waterways to barter radio tubes and battery. Cells for dried meat or root vegetables someone grew on their hoisted rooftop farm. My strongest tool is this radio. I maintain an assortment of gear, a pedal-powered generator, a collapsed solar array wired into a battered charge controller, and a handful of dying batteries I rotate in and out. Each broadcast is a lifeline for me and for anyone else out there listening. I track weather readings, read coded messages from survivor groups, and sometimes, if I'm brave, I play an old folk song I found on a cassette. Music reminds me of what we lost, laughter around campfires, late-night conversations under clear skies, the world before, the endless rain. Between broadcasts, I scavenge. I dive into the murk to dismantle submerged storefronts, ripping copper, wire from wrecked electronics. I climb onto half-sunk cars and shimmy across roofs, slick with algae, to collect any solar panels left intact. I barter those scraps for Staples soap batteries, a torn canvas to patch my coat. Every trip into the flooded streets is a gamble. Raiders patrol the canals in high-speed skiffs, their guns trained on anyone who dares cross their domain. I keep my face hidden beneath a hood and my voice low when I navigate their checkpoints. Mostly, they leave me alone. I'm too small a score. I survive because remembrance keeps me alive. There are names etched in my mind. My sister to a flash flood while she searched for medicine. Jonas, my partner at the press, swept away by a sudden surge in water pressure that collapsed a levee upstream. My parents, who I can't remember well, because I was just a child when the first storms began to rage. I don't broadcast for glory. I broadcast so the dead have voices, so the frightened have guidance, so the scattered survivors know they are not alone. Every time I hear a responsa-clipped signal passing through the storm static, I feel those losses shift from weights in my chest to fuel in my veins. I keep going because I owe it to them. I still carry Lila's Lakota tarnished silver, heart around my neck. It rests against my skin, cold and familiar. Some nights I wake and clutch it, my dreams fraught with rushing water and her crying voice calling my name. I wake gasping, the walls dripping, the generator clicking like a cursed heartbeat, and I have to remind myself, she is gone. This hollow station is the only place I have left to call home. Sometimes I sit at the edge of the flooded courtyard and let the water stroke my fingers. The current pulls at my coat, at my boots, like it's trying to pull my soul out behind it. I stare at what used to be my neighborhood townhomes, now half submerged, playground swings swaying in brown. Water, the skeletal frame of the community center, poking through the surface like a shark's dorsal fin. I think about what we built here. Schools, parks, a little coffee shop where the barista knew my order by heart. Those memories taste like salt on my tongue, mixed with the sour Thames of decay. I fight to keep resentment at bay. I would have turned on the radio to hear a politician promise relief, guarantee rescue missions, pledge that no one would be left behind. Those days are dead. The government that thought itself immortal crumbled the moment the storms tuned into a scream. Now, any authority is local. The water lords who control the dams, the raiders who hold hostage passage through the strangled canals, the rooftop communes who haggle with lantern light over trading strings of fish and root vegetables. Trust has become the most expensive currency, yet in the darkest hours. Yesterday, as I climbed the tilted roof of an old library, I uncovered a bundle of paperback, sweathered but largely intact. I read passages aloud on air, my voice echoing across the waves, stories of triumph, of endurance, of love surviving. War and famine, a voice answered, like a child's laugh, carried by static. Just that laugh, it was enough. Enough to remind me that laughter can still echo, even here. At dawn, I watch the horizon lighten through the rain, a faint pink glow behind churning gray clouds. I tell myself it's sunrise, not just the reflection of unseen fires somewhere beyond the city. I collect that thought like a precious stone and tuck it into the corner of my mind. If the world is ending, let it end with a sunrise. My routine is a prayer to the old world. I rise before first light, stoke the small charcoal stove I jury-rigged inside the radio room to keep the damp at bay. I brew a cup of whatever grounds I can find. Sometimes it's coffee. Sometimes it's tea leaves from a discarded box labeled Earl Grey. And I speak my gratitude aloud for the roof I have, for the minute of peace before the news begins. Then I scan the skies. I record temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. I adjust my antenna to catch the next broadcast. I tighten sandbags. I repair leaks with plastic sheeting torn from abandoned warehouses. I read the maps I made long ago, tracing familiar paths, now submerged underwater that gums my shoes at the ankles. When the clock chimes the hour, I flip on the transmitter. My voice, husky from years of shouting over the generator, cracks as I greet whoever is listening. I report local conditions. I read messages. Harry in Sector 7, send more batteries. The North End Commune, safe haven coordinates for 2 passing vessels. I cue a song or a poem, something human to punctuate the dread. And then, once more, I conclude. This is Mara Keene, signing often till the rain stops, or until my voice can't carry any more. Some nights, after the broadcast, I stare at my reflection in a standing puddle on the dusty floor. I see hollowed cheeks, hair matted with sweat and rainwater, eyes rimmed red. I ask myself, why do you keep going? What's the point if everything is drowning? The answer is always the same, because giving up would be a betrayal to Leela, to Jonas, to the countless souls who tuned in one last time and never tuned back out. I carry 2 journals. One chronicles the weather data I've been charting patterns since before the floods went global. The other holds memories, sketches of my sister's face, the recipe for Jonas's favorite stew, the lyrics to our song. When the sky finally clears, if it ever does, I plan to bury these journals in dry earth, so someone, years from now, can dig them up and know we were here. No, we tried. I know I am small, a single station in a drowned metropolis, but in this endless water world, voices matter. We build bridges of sound across the void. We find each other in the wreckage. We swap stories. We share instructions on how to build a floating stove or harvest moss for tea. I am one link in that fragile chain, so I broadcast again. I polish each word like a lifeline. I wait for the response, the crackling acknowledgement that someone out there hears me. Maybe they are hiding in a half-sunken church. Maybe they're drifting on a raft sewn from curtains. Maybe they're just clinging to a rooftop, teeth chattering against the cold rain. Whoever they are, I speak for them, because seeing no light doesn't mean there is none. Hope doesn't vanish when the skies turn black. It hides in the static, in a whispered message. I am here. Do you read me? The storm arrived without warning that morning. No low rumble on the horizon, no crimson glow at sunrise. One moment the sky was its usual iron gray, oppressive but familiar, and the next it opened like a wound. Walls of water torrents, dense enough to blot out the world, smashed into the fire station with such force the windows groaned in their frames. I dropped my radio mic, bolted upright, and fought to keep my footing on the slick concrete floor. The generator clattered and faltered, spluttering as the intake flooded. I yanked the pedal crank free, flooded with adrenaline, and began to pump, desperate to keep the broadcast alive. If I lost the station now, I'd lose the one thread connecting me to everyone else. This wasn't just another downpour. The storms had evolved, supercharged by a climate tipping point none of us saw coming. Decades of unchecked emissions had superheated the atmosphere, increasing its moisture-holding capacity by nearly 7% for every degree Celsius of warming. The result, precipitation events so intense they shattered historical records. Only last month, the river gauge at Central Bridge recorded a 48-hour deluge of over 600 millimeters of rain, 3 times the average annual rainfall for this region. 2 generations ago, That water didn't trickle. It roared, carving new channels, swallowing streets, raising buildings originally deemed flood-proof as the downpour hammered the roof in deafening sheets. I thought back to the day the levee burst. I was standing on what used to be a riverbank promenade, cobbled stones beneath my boots, families strolling with ice cream cones. Then came the roar, a wall of water 5 meters tall, racing toward us faster than any human could run. In seconds, it washed us off our feet, tossed us like rag dolls. I lost my notebook, my recorder, and almost my life. When I surfaced, gasping, I saw children clinging to lampposts, floating bodies tangled in street signs. That was the day survival stopped being about resourcefulness and became a raw fight for every breath. Survival is harder now because the world's systems have collapsed one by one. The water cycle runs a gentle rhythm of evaporation and rainfalls, now a violent oscillation. Prolonged droughts parch the soil for months on end, only to be followed by monsoons of biblical proportions. Crops fail under blistering suns, then fields drown, rotting seeds into muck. Farmers have abandoned their lands. The once fertile plains have turned into mudflats, studded with twisted irrigation pipes and skeletal tractors. The last global food summit tried to coordinate seed banks and genotype, engineered crops resistant to both flood and drought. But the logistics crumbled when shipping lanes became impassable. Swamp roads and airports lay submerged beneath 10 feet of water. Resources are now measured in drops per person. My daily water allotment, what little I collect and purify, stretches to a single liter for drinking, half a liter for my meager cooking. The rest goes into the battery-powered heater that keeps mold from devouring my radio room. Food rations consist of dehydrated goods and whatever I can barter. Smoked fish from the river communes, foraged wild roots that taste of dirt and bitterness. Fuel is a myth, no petrol, no diesel, no natural gas. I run the generator on biodiesel I distill. From algae I cultivate in barrels on the roof. The yield is 15 milliliters per liter of green sludge, enough for 5 minutes of broadcast. After that, silence. Every broadcast slot is a negotiation between urgency and energy conservation. I open with weather, data, temperature, barometric, pressure, wind gusts, then shift to alerts. Rogue Raider patrols sighted east of Sector 5. Safe passage coordinates through the collapsed overpass at 9th Avenue. Distribution points for purified water reserves. I save my final wattage for a human touch, a message of solidarity, a brief poem, a snippet of music. It costs me fuel, but when a voice crackles back, "Mara, this is Lena at the Riverside Haven. We hear you. We're alive. It's all worth it." Encounters with other survivors punctuate my days with both relief and dread. Yesterday, I met Elias, a former hydrologist turned scavenger. He paddled up in a leaking punt, offering me a trade, 10 packaged doses of oral rehydration, salts in exchange for my last unbroken satellite phone antenna. He wore a gas mask rigged with tinted lenses to protect against acid rain, and he smelled of chlorine and damp wool. He warned me of a new faction calling themselves the Flood Guard, who claim dominion over the southern canals. They've armed themselves with makeshift flamethrowers and converted tour boats into river patrolling gunships. Their leader, a man named Crow, broadcasts threats on a hijacked frequency. Any station caught east of Central Bridge will be considered hostile and destroyed. Elias says Crow believes absolute control over water is the only path to power now. I wanted to laugh control water, control life itself, but instead I nodded and locked my equipment away. Trust is rationed tighter than water. The flood guard aren't the only threat. Last week, I discovered a makeshift camp of desperate scavengers, huddled beneath a half-sunken hospital wing. They'd cut power lines to siphon cable for wiring and improvised a furnace from the boiler room to dry out their clothes. They offered to share ration-stale crackers and a rusted can of Peach-Zip. I consented to broadcast propaganda for them. Join the new order, where water is life and life is ours to command. I refused. They gave me the peaches anyway, saying they respected my independence. Then, as I paddled away, one of them spat, "Enjoy your 2 liters. Just remember, tomorrow we might come back for your generator." I smiled back, knowing he was right. Survival is a calculus of constant compromise. Every alliance risks betrayal. Every trade can turn into extortion. And the storms amplify the stakes. Narrow canals become death traps when flash floods surge. Without warning, the weather reports I broadcast aren't courtesy, they're lifelines. Yesterday, I predicted a rain front cluster forming over the ridge cells of moisture, drawn into cyclonic patterns by the warming Gulf. Temperatures upstream hit 32 degrees Celsius by noon, causing rapid evaporation. By 6 p.m., the storm cells coalesced into a wall of rain 2 kilometers wide, barreling downhill at 30 kilometers per hour. I warned Sector 4 to seal hatches, Sector 7 to brace for inundation. By midnight, the water had risen to meters, and I heard screams on the backup channel as people scrambled onto rooftops. 2 lives saved. That's the difference between data and desperation. Science has become both shield and bullet. I record salinity measures of the floodwater's chloride levels, spiking as seawater breaches coastal levees via storm surges. Freshwater sources now often tastes brackish. Kidney failure from overconsumption is a growing threat. Cyanobacteria blooms flourish in stagnant canals warmed by the sun, releasing toxins that dull the mind and burn the throat. I identify these risks on air. Do not drink unless filtered with charcoal or reverse osmosis cell. The advice costs time and energy, but ignorance kills faster than thirst. Each passing day, the environment pushes harder. Temperature extremes. Shattered records. A blistering 45 degrees Celsius in the shade behind the old library. Then torrential rains that dropped 200 millimeters in an hour. That kind of fluctuation fractures pipes, buckles, roads, and tears at the nerves of anyone caught outside. Rainwater acidic with dissolved pollutants from collapsed chemical plants corrodes metal structures within weeks. Bridges, once symbols of human ingenuity, now disintegrate mid-span into the roiling current. I watch each collapse on a loop. In my mind, as if the world's slow-motion demolition is the only thing keeping me awake at night. Yet panic is not an option. I maintain a crisis routine. Every dawn, I calibrate my barometer. Every dusk, I patrol the sensor arrays on the rooftop. Every radio slot, I drill emergency codes. Echo Tango 5, code red, immediate evacuation. I've practiced those words until they hurt my tongue. I've seen code red zones, entire districts drowning so fast that people jump from windows rather than float in the halls. I've heard the shrill whistle of water rushing through door crevices as their final chorus in this landscape of ceaseless conflict, storm versus land, human versus storm, human versus humans. Survival narrows to a series of choices: drink or ration, run or fortify, trust or hide. And through it all, I cling to the radio waves, straining for a voice on the other end. When an ally's signal flickers, in hang tight, Merriweir sending medkits, I feel a surge of warmth that cuts through the cold despair. It reminds me that even in a world drowning in rain, human connection can be the ark we've built to stay afloat. So I broadcast again, even as the walls shake with each thunderclap. I share the latest hydrological data: river height rising at 12 centimeters an hour at the old dam site, dissolved oxygen levels plummeting, indicating fish die-offs that will starve the river communes. The next rain cell projected to arrive in 3 hours with 150 millimeters of precipitation. I end with a simple request. If you're hearing this, please reply. We need to know who's holding where and how quickly the water's coming. Then I listen, heart pounding against my ribs, for the crackle that means someone, anyone is still out there, still fighting, still alive, because without that reply, without that human echo, all the data in the world would mean nothing, and the storm would win. The cold rain pounded on my makeshift antenna as I keyed the transmitter. My voice trembled when I spoke. The tremor wasn't from fear, but from exhaustion. Fuel, water, and hope were all running low. The gray light outside was failing again, and with it, the meager warmth I'd coaxed from the barrel stove. I ran through my inventory in my head. Water, 40 liters stored in jerry cans, filtered and rationed down to 2 liters per day. Food, 3 days' supply of dehydrated pulses and half a bag of mushrooms the rooftop gardener traded me last week. Fuel, enough biodiesel for 20 minutes of generator time, just long enough for 2 broadcasts. Ammunition, 5 rounds. In my pistol, 3 for self-defense and 2 for signaling if I had to call for help. That was it. No margins for error. No safety net. 2 days ago, the skies were mercifully quiet. I used that lull to paddle out beyond the half-collapsed cathedral steeple, where I'd spotted a cluster of concrete pilings dogging the current. I thought, maybe they support some forgotten cistern, a buried reservoir that miraculously escaped the flood. I dove into frigid water, cutting myself on submerged metal and slippery debris. I found nothing but rat nests and algae-choked pipes. Every pulse I frantically used to free the passage only stirred fresh mud. I resurfaced, coughing, heart pounding, knowing I'd gambled my last buoyancy for a rumor dot that same night. The rain returned, more furious than ever. A thunderclap cracked the sky open and sent a shockwave through the building. The levee breach upstream sent a wave that flooded the courtyard, rising over my boots in seconds. The cassette of folk songs I'd hoped to play crashed into the water, the tape a tangled ruin. I thought, I am cursed. Every attempt to find relief seems to drown me further, and yet I pressed on. The next morning, I measured my water reserves, exactly 2 liters left. I calculated the distance to the next safe water drop, a rumored solar-powered filtration unit perched on the roof of the old hospital. 15 minutes paddle east. If I made that trip, returned with at least 10 liters, I'd secure 3 more days of drinking water. The generator would have just enough juice to broadcast the coordinates and warn anyone else who might try the same run. But I barely made it midway. A sudden surge-an unseen back current from a submerged burst pipe-snapped my canoe's prow into swirling eddies. Water cascaded over my knees, then chest, and I clung to a bent lamppost, teeth chattering, lungs screaming. I saw a dark shape moving under the surface, an upturned corpse or a scavenger in a wetsuit. I couldn't tell. I gunned the paddle, forcing myself away. When I finally dragged the canoe onto a half-sunken lawn, the hospital's solar panels winked at me through the Reina promise half-broken. Someone had plundered the filtration unit. I pressed my fist against the glass, feeling betrayal echo through my bones. Last week, I'd heard on the scanner that a gang called the Stormhawks had seized control of the canal network near the old water treatment plant. They'd rigged steel-barreled barges with autopilots scavenged from sunken cruise ships. They used searchlights and drone surveillance, stolen from a defunct power facility to spot lone travelers. Their motto, no water, no mercy. They raided convoy barges, jettisoned survivors into the flood without a second thought, and melted scrap metal to fashion armor plating. They claimed the treatment plant as their fortress, though the structure itself was flooded up to 2 floors. They guarded the only generators left intact, hoarding electricity like a horde of starving wolves with a single bone. I considered running a broadcast to negotiate, or at least warn other travelers, but I couldn't risk it. Stormhawks monitored pirate frequencies. Any plea for mercy would have flagged me as a target. Instead, I made a detour longer, more dangerous, through back channels. I traded 2 precious batteries for a faded map showing a secret sluice gate beneath the old lock system. It was supposed to bypass the Stormhawks' patrols. I memorized the coordinates and an escape route drawn in trembling ink, paid the scavenger, and paddled on before he changed his mind. It was on that same trip, soaked to the bone and gritting, my teeth against hypothermia, that I first heard whispers of the Silver Spring, a water source buried deep underground, untouched by saltwater intrusion, heated by geothermal vents, and naturally filtered through rock. Satellite scans from before. The floods had supposedly detected a freshwater aquifer beneath a dormant volcano 10 hours paddle north. No one knew where exactly, only that its springs bubbled in a clearing ringed by barren cliffs-untouched oasis in a drowned world. I dismissed it as fantasy. I've chased too many fantasies, but every rumor is seeded with hope, and hope is a dangerous thing to kill. That night, I dug through old maps from the station archives, piecing together the fragments of coordinates scribbled on dusty pages. The aquifer lay just beyond the Stormhawks' eastern flank, meaning a direct run would cross their territory. A detour would add days to my journey, more cans of fuel I don't have, more meals I don't possess. Yet the idea of pure water, untainted by brine or disease, filled me with a vigor I thought long spent. I remembered Lila's face when we drank from a mountain spring on a family camping trip. I remembered the taste of clarity, the way the cold water burned sweet down the throat. Could the Silver Spring be real? Or was it just another mirage, another lie told by scavengers, hoping to drain hopeful travelers of what little they carried? I knew only one way to find out. My nights have become restless battlegrounds of doubt. I wake drenched with sweat, imagining the stormhawks descending like black birds of prey on the station. I see raiders breaking down the door, hear their laughter as they seize my gear. At dawn, I whisper into the silence, just pack up and go. Run north, find the Silver Spring, leave all this behind. Then I look at the radio stations, mixing board labels, fading, knobs taped to mark frequency and I remember why I stay. Someone out there might still need to hear a human voice. Someone might tune in at the next storm, lull, and think, there's someone else alive. I'm not alone. If I leave, that voice goes silent forever. I need that tech. I need 10 people friends to help hold this station, to rebuild a community. I need fresh water more than anything. But handing over my data feels like arming someone with the blueprint to dominate every water source in the flooded world. A benevolent dictator with a desalination monopoly is still a dictator. Could I trust the skyward refuge to share rather than seize control? Or would I be delivering humanity's last chance at equitable water distribution into the hands of a new tyrant? 2 nights ago, the generators sputtered out mid-broadcast. The rain had drained my barrels faster than I anticipated, and the biodiesel reactor on the roof clogged with cyanobacteria mats. The lights flickered and died. For a moment, the station was silent dark. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my pistol. I wondered if this was the end, lost in the static, alone, swallowed by the flood. Then a single ping from the receiver broke through. "Mara, you still there?" Lena's raspy voice, trembling. She was broadcasting from her rooftop greenhouse mirror, miles away but effectively cut off by collapsed bridges and Stormhawk patrols. I flipped the emergency crank and spoke into the dark. "I'm here, barely, but I'm here." Her words were a lifeline. "Hang on, we'll send what we can." I held that promise like a torch against the night. But when morning came, no supplies appeared. Just a note carved into a scrap of wood. Trust no one blind. This morning, I stand at a crossroads. I've plotted 2 courses. Steal away under cover of the dawn storm. Navigate past Stormhawk checkpoints via back channels and follow the old map to the aquifer. If it exists, I return with pure water that could save dozens, maybe hundreds. But the journey is a gauntlet. Raiders, exhaustion, the risk of the map being wrong. Respond to their broadcast. Arrange a covert meeting in the cratered shell of the old observatory. Hand over my data. Receive the desalination unit. Instant relief enough to stabilize the station and open taps for neighbors. But I become indebted. What if they share the tech selectively, hoarding it under the guise of security? My hands hover over the radio controls. The wind outside hisses through broken cracks, and the rain thuns like a ticking clock. I close my eyes and remember Lila's laughter on that long-forgotten camping trip. I remember Jonas's steady hand guiding me through storm drains during the first floods. I remember the faces of people I've never met, but whose voices have answered my call. Hope can be a curse when it blinds you to risk, but despair is a death sentence all its own. I take a deep breath, steady the trembling in my chest, and key the transmitter once more. My voice is firm, urgent, ready to commit. This is Mara Keene. to Skyward Refuge. I accept your terms. Send me your coordinates. I'll bring the data. Then, before I can reconsider, I cut the feed and press the mic off. Silence. The radio's click echoes in my skull. I lean back, palms against my temples. The storm rages on no ally, no enemy, no certainty, only the choice I've just made. And whatever comes next, there will be no turning back. The rising action has brought me here to a moment of fate where survival means risking everything, trust, knowledge, and perhaps even my life. In the drowned world, decisions like these are the only land left to stand on, and I'm about to place my weight on a single plank, hoping it holds, and lightning that turned the horizon into a strobing tableau of fury. I was mid-broadcast when the tremor hit, rattling the fire station like a drum. My heart leaped into my throat as I scanned the receiver. Frantic calls from Sector 3, Sector 6, the Riverside Haven, then a shriek of static, then silence. I dropped the mic. The generator shuddered, then died. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the electric flicker of my handheld lantern. I bolted outside, rain lashing my face, to see the courtyard dividing into a fissure, ripping open concrete like eggshell. Water gushed up from below, frothing with mud, as if the earth had cracked to vomit its poisoned entrails. The tremor was no quake, but the collapse of the old sewer under a building's weight, and now it was siphoning away my refuge. Behind me, the station's walls began to buckle. I heard the groan of steel beams twisting. My boots found purchase on a shifting slab of concrete, and I sprinted back inside, grabbing my pack and radio kit. The door jammed against the rising water, so I kicked it off its hinges. A sheeting wall of brown water chased me into the radio room neck, deep in seconds. I jammed the door shut, bracing my shoulder against its warped frame as the current battered me. I fought for breath in the murky depths, chest tight with panic. The radio console floated off its stand, wires trailing. Wrenching free my data drives, I pressed the emergency frequency button. This is Mara Keene. The station is compromised code red. Evacuate immediately. My words were swallowed by water and static, but I held the mic tight anyway. If anyone heard, they'd know not to come here. Then came the pounding on the Dora rapid staccato of boots and fists. The Hawks, the flood guard, masked figures burst in, guns raised. I raised my hands, dripping, my pistol clutched in one hand and the data drives in the other. Their leader, a scarred woman with cold blue eyes, barked, "Drop it." I hesitated. 30 meters of water separated me from the courtyard exit. Above, the ceiling sagged ominously. Behind them, the station was a coffin filling with fluid. I knew I had to choose. Surrender my drives, years of meticulously recorded weather data, and the key to the Skyward Refuge's desalination technology, or risk drowning and letting the station collapse with me inside. My mind snapped to Lila's. Lock it against my chest. My sister's face flashed before me, her laughter as she splashed in a mountain stream. For her, I had sworn to preserve every drop of knowledge about water. If I gave up the drives, someone could weaponize the data to monopolize clean water forever. But if I refused, I would die here, and the information would be lost entirely. "Take it," I rasped, tossing the drives toward the intruders. The scarred woman caught them, eyeing me. "You made the right choice," she snarled. A tremor ripped through the room again, louder, closer. The ceiling cracked. debris raining down between us. Water surged over our knees. The woman barked orders to her crew, and they fled through the doorway. She hesitated her finger on the trigger, then lowered her weapon and retreated. I dropped to my knees, gasping as the room began to collapse. A steel support beam came loose, crashing through the roof and sending a geyser of rain onto my head. I crawled toward the back wall, where I'd spotted a narrow maintenance hatch leading to the alley. My limbs burned as I dragged myself, every inch a victory of will. Just as I reached the hatch, the station shuddered and began to sink into the churn below. I kicked at the metal plate, pried it open, and hoisted myself into the tunnel as the wall behind me crumbled. Water poured in, then gushed after me, but I scrambled forward on slick concrete inside the tunnel. The darkness was absolute, the roar of the flood overhead, muffled but menacing. My lantern's beam revealed a slick slope leading up to a rusted grate. I heaved myself up, shoved the grate aside, and tumbled into the alley, where the downpour erased all evidence of my escape. I lay on the pavement, soaked through, lungs screaming for air. Above me, lightning lit the sky in blinding arcs. I forced myself to stand, to turn my face to the rain, to feel the cold relief of water falling freely. I raised my hand and pressed the broadcast button one last time from my handheld radio. This is Mara Keene. I'm alive. The station is gone. I have transferred the data. Seek the skyward refuge at grid coordinates Delta 7. I'll find you. Then the battery died. I stood there in the storm, drenched, bruised, the city collapsing behind me. The turning point had come. My choice had been made. The path forward lay through betrayal and survival, and I was alone once more, but still alive. I woke at first light, shivering beneath a metal overhang behind the collapsed station. The rain had slackened to a drizzle, but the world remained, sodden. My clothes were ragged shreds, my hands numb from clutching the hatch. My radio lay beside me, silent but intact. Slowly, I surveyed the ruin. The fire station's facade was half tilted into the courtyard, like a dying animal, water sluicing through its belly. The courtyard itself had become a swirling pool, sending currents that tugged at debris. Among the wreckage, I spotted the severed ends of the antenna I'd erected. My home, my sanctuary, was lost. I rummaged through my pack. No water, no food. My pistol was empty. All that remained was the handheld radio, a few matchsticks, and a photograph of Lila, taped to the inside of my journal cover. I pressed the photo to my lips and whispered, "I'm sorry." But I didn't give up. I rose on trembling legs and set my sights on the skyward refuge's coordinates. My map, singed and wrinkled by water, had the observatory crater marked. It lay eastward, 10 kilometers through submerged streets and patrol zones. I waded into the floodwaters and began to walk, each step a painful negotiation with unseen obstacles beneath the murk. The city was unrecognizable in daylight. Buildings leaned at precarious angles. Streetlights dangled above a chest-high river. I used rooftops and elevated debris bus frames, overturned trucks to propel myself forward without drowning. Every so often, I paused to rest on a car roof, scanning the skyline for the skeletal spire of the observatory. Halfway there, I spotted movement, 2 figures on a makeshift raft paddling toward me. My heart pounded. Raiders. Allies, I clamored. onto a nearby overpass and called out. They answered in hushed tones, members of the Skyward Refuge. They'd heard my broadcast and came looking. Relief and suspicion warred in me as they guided me onto their raft, offering a small flask of water and a handful of jerky. I accepted, too tired to question their intentions. Their leader, a wiry man named Cole, explained they'd lost the desalination unit in a skirmish with the Stormhawks 2 nights prior. He held up salvaged circuit boards and torn membranes. It's barely functional, he admitted. We brought you here for your data. We hoped we could repair it. My stomach sank. The drives I'd surrendered were useless without the station's specialized calibration rig. Without it, their prototype would at best produce a trickle of fresh water. I clenched my fists, fury and despair swirling. Cole saw my reaction. We didn't ambush you, he said. We tracked you for a week, through raids and floods. We respect what you do, but right now, we need your expertise. I realized this was my chance. If I lent them my knowledge, my charts, my code, they could refine the membranes, optimize flow rates, adjust pressure thresholds. They needed the raw data, but more importantly, they needed my skill, and I needed them. We reached the observatory as the sun broke through clouds, a rare shaft of light igniting the broken dish like a promise. Inside, the massive radio telescope lay half-crushed, its support beams mangled, but the control room was intact. Overhead skylights leaked water onto painstakingly rigged solar panels, and a row of wind turbines jury-rigged around the rim. Their blades creaked in the wind, generating a faint hum of electricity. Cole's team hustled to rig the membranes into a makeshift housing. I set up laptops salvaged from the station, loaded my environmental models, and began calibrating. Hours blurred. I pored over equations for osmotic pressures, adjusted for salinity fluctuations drawn from my data, and iterated flow rate tests on the prototype pump. Outside, the rain began again, gentle at first, then heavier, perfect for testing. When we opened the valve, brackish water from the canal gurgled into the intake. The membrane hissed under pressure. A steady trickle of clear water emerged. I tasted it cool, sweet, free of brine. Tears blurred my vision as I choked out. We did it. Cole grinned, raising the vial of the filtered water. To new beginnings. For the first time in months, I believed it. That night, we sat around, a circle of LED lanterns in the observatory dome, sharing rations and filtered water. I told them my story, the station's fall, the data drives, the moral choice under the flood. They listened in silence. Then Cole spoke. Without your voice, none of us would be here. Your sacrifice saved more than data it saved our faith. I realized then that trust is reciprocal. I'd given them everything I had, and they'd honored it. Together, we weren't just scrambling for scraps. We were building something new, but hope remains fragile. The prototype could still fail under a sustained storm. The Stormhawks might attack the observatory next, drawn by the promise of clean water, and the floods still raged, ever unpredictable. Yet, with this breakthrough, we had a fighting chance. I looked out at the flooded cityscape from the broken window, roofs gleaming with rain, antennae sprouting like desperate hands reaching skyward. I felt a pang of sorrow for the station I'd lost, but also a surge of purpose. My journey had led me here to a turning point, not just in my life, but potentially for every soul drowned in this deluge. The next dawn was clear, an anomalously bright morning after the storm that leveled my station. I stood atop the observatory's rim, the rebuilt membrane unit humming beside me, and watched the sun rise behind rain-dark clouds. The world remains wounded, but for once it felt possible to heal. We transmitted the new desalination schematics on every frequency we could reach. I heard responses within minutes, static-laced voices from drowned rooftops, murmurs of gratitude, tears over the airwaves. Survivor pods mapped out locations, ready to assemble membrane units of their own. I prepared a coded broadcast instructing them on construction and maintenance, torque settings for the pump, pressure differentials for the membrane, recommended cleaning cycles. My voice was steady, urgent, but beneath it thrummed a note of triumph. I thought of Lila, of Jonas, of every soul lost to water's unrelenting rage. Their memories had fueled my resolve. Now their legacy would flow through every drop of clean water we produced. The world would not forgive us not, Italy, but perhaps it would remember us as the ones who refused to let hope drown. I've learned that survival is not just a matter of rationing supplies or holding out against the storm. It's about sharing what we have, pooling our strengths, and refusing to accept that the flood is the final chapter. In the water's mirror, we see both our reflection and our future. My final message on air is simple. This is Mara Keen, signing off from the Skyward Refuge. The desalination blueprints are yours now. Build them, share them, keep our water flowing and our spirits unbroken. The rain may pour, the rivers may rise, but together we will not sink. Stay alive, stay human. I don't know what tomorrow holds. There will be new storms, new threats, new betrayals. But for today, we have clean water. For today, we have each other. For today, hope flows as surely as the floodwaters we fight. And as long as we breathe, as long as we share our stories and our resources, there remains a chance that one day the rains will soften, the rivers will recede, and we will rebuild on solid ground. Until then, we carry the arc of human will on our shoulders, flooded but unbroken, daring the deluge to drown our resolve. Stay with us, keep listening. The story isn't over yet.